Morning, everyone. Thanks for hopping on. A couple different things for those of you who have not been on one of these trainings before. You can log on. You can ask questions on the side, or if you feel like you are, in a quiet environment, then we can, just let you unmute you and let you, ask the question verbally without having to type it in. There's only a few. I think there's 7 or 8 of us on today, so it shouldn't be too much of a hassle just to let you speak. If that's what you prefer, just let us know. Or you can see on the side there's a question box, and you can just drop it right into there, and we will, like I said, we'll address it. And there's also a chat box down at the bottom, which Lisa and I have already been pretty active in this morning. So again, thanks for hopping on. We're going to be talking about buyer and seller negotiations today. I'm going to take you through kind of, start to finish, the things that you should be thinking about, or the things that you can think about during, buyer negotiations. One last thing, if anybody has any problem with the sound or the quality or whatever it is, just please let me know, and we'll try to adjust where we are, where we're sitting, or with the recording, what we're doing in terms of the recording. So John Stanford in the flesh. Nice, thanks for joining us. So buyer seller negotiations, we're going to start off with, I know some of you are already familiar with this. For those of you who are not, I think it's a good place to start. If we started talking about negotiating, offers and all that, that would be, I think it'd be kind of an awkward place to start. So I think the beginning of this is kind of making sure that you understand the buyer seller timeline. This is actually something that we have in our Dropbox folder. You can give this out to clients. You can use it and make sure that you fully understand it. It's something that we kind of want you to follow along, or not, to the letter of the law, but as a guideline for submitting your offers and understanding when you are looking at things from the seller side, you understand timelines as well. Throughout this training, I think I'm going to focus more on the seller side of the business versus the buyer side. And if you understand the seller side really well, indirectly you'll understand where you should be as a buyer's agent as well, or representing your buyers properly. So if you look at the buyer's timeline, you list a property to sell, you sign a listing agreement, you put it on the market, you do your marketing, you get it on MLS. From the time that you submit or it's the time that you receive an offer, because we're looking at this from the seller's agent position, despite that it says buyer timeline, that's the OTP, or offer to purchase. So that's what starts your buyer timeline. Your offer comes in, the offer is accepted, everything's good. You go from there. Typically, you go into a 10-day home inspection period. Your buyer's agent and the buyer have to bring in a home inspection to your property. They have 10 days to do their, typically you do your lead paint inspection during this period as well, any pest inspections. If you are in a position or are selling a property where you need a radon test, it's going to be done during this period as well. So you have about a 10-day window there. The reason I'm mentioning this is part of negotiating is not all just about price. Sometimes you want to shorten this period. Sometimes it can be a little bit more lengthy. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Once your home inspection period ends, in a very clean transaction, both attorneys get together, the buyer representative and the seller's attorney get together. They put a purchase and sales agreement together. And then you go what we call under contract or under agreement, at that time. And that's usually day 14, day 15, somewhere around there. After purchase and sales is signed by both parties, you are under contract. And typically from there, your contract or your purchase and sales is going to go over to your mortgage broker. And typically, if the mortgage broker is on top of things, they need about 30 days, maybe a little bit less, to get you to your closing date. We're going to talk about some of the other things that you'll possibly have to negotiate in between purchase and sales and closing as well. Not everything goes well in terms of appraisals and everything else. So typically what you see is your timeline is about 45 days, maybe 50, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit shorter, depending on who your buyer is, how diligent they are in providing documentation to the mortgage broker, how good your mortgage broker is, how many holidays are thrown in there, how many weekends are thrown in there. But in a perfect world, your transaction's about 45 days. Offer to purchase, the purchase is accepted, 10-day home inspection, a couple days for purchase and sales, and then about 30 days more to get you to closing. Can we record this session? Yeah, the session is being recorded. And like I said, we'll offer that to everyone that was on here as well, just in case you anything wasn't clear, you want to reference it again. So that's your buyer seller timeline. From there, let's talk about again, we're going to kind of, and Lisa, feel free to jump in at any point and like I said, add anything or like I said, clarify anything that I'm talking about. I think a good place to start is on the seller side, right from the start. The first thing that you're going to negotiate really is working with your seller client, the commission, the contract, the terms of the contract, the length of the contract. But in sales, I like to call it, and again, not like I created this term, but getting to the kitchen table. You want to get your seller client to a place where they feel comfortable, in their home, at their kitchen table, in an environment that they're used to. And the reason that is you're trying to encourage them to allow you to sell their biggest asset, one of their largest asset, their home, a place where they have a lot of emotional ties potentially if it's a single family home or if they live there. Sometimes they've been there for 25, 30 years or more, and now you're coming in and you're telling them to remove photos and clean up and do all these different things. If you're going to say all these different things and make them feel uncomfortable, at least have them in a kitchen, a kitchen table or an environment where they feel comfortable. The other thing that you want to consider is, and I think most of you have heard me say this at some point, people are typically lazy. Statistics tell us that if you get an interview with a seller, there's a good chance that you're going to get that listing. People will not interview more than 2 agents typically. They will not move on to the third. So even if you do have a seller who does their due diligence and is interviewing a couple agents, you still pretty much have a 50-50 shot at getting that listing. So what you want to do is often enough, a lot of new agents try to negotiate too much over the phone. They quickly try to size up their client over the phone. In a position where you're trying to get a listing, I like to get to the kitchen table, get them, in their home, and then I like to do what I call just basically wearing them out. I try to, understanding that people are lazy, understanding that people probably don't want to interview a second agent. I'm not trying to go in there and spend 10 minutes. I want to go in there and ask every single question I possibly can. I want to see every single aspect of the house that I possibly can. I want to see upstairs. I want to see the attic. I want to see the basement. When you think about that logically, you put the logic in that. If someone spends an hour with me, an hour and a half, and we're sitting down and they toured the entire house and I'm making suggestions about things they can possibly fix and asking a bunch of questions, and I know every intricate detail of that house, like I've lived there. And then I sit down at the kitchen table with them and we spend another 30 minutes talking about their reasoning for selling, their logic for selling. What are they looking for? Do they have a price in mind? Their timeline. Who are the other decision makers? And we'll talk about that. If after 90 minutes of going through all that, who wants to spend another 90 minutes with another real estate agent doing the same thing? There's a good chance that I'm going to get that listing. Just statistically speaking, most people are just going to say, yeah, you know what? He was so thorough going through and he knows everything there is about this other house. I mean, I might as well give him a shot at this point. So get your client to the kitchen table, get them to a place where they're feeling comfortable. And then get in front of them, get the face-to-face. And again, like I said, one of the things that Lisa and I've noticed throughout, doing this and a lot of the conversations that we had is too many people too often try to, close a sale over the phone, especially if we're sending you a lead, or if you're generating a lead, somebody calls you up and says they have an interest in selling. Yeah, you want to get your basic information. Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating that you basically just pick up the phone, get an address, and head over there. You want to collect email address as much information as you can. But before I hang up that phone, I'm trying to get a face-to-face meeting. I'm trying to get in front of them, whether it be a few days from now, later on today, or a week from now. I'm trying to get something scheduled so they can understand who Willie is, get in front of them, and just build that rapport. And hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So what are you doing? And again, I know we're talking about negotiation, but I kind of want to have some basis for understanding. I don't want to go straight into contract negotiation or commissions or anything like that. So what am I trying to do at each one of these meetings? First and foremost, and I've made this mistake a lot in my career, is I've rushed too much to talk to the sister of the actual seller or the daughter of the actual seller. And if that's the person that's calling you, you try to get as much information, out of them as possible. But what I'm ultimately trying to do is I'm trying to figure out who the decision makers are. You know that a lot of people, a lot of times, and I do it all the time, I defer. If someone's trying to sell me something, I have to speak to my wife. I don't really know. Like I said, she makes the decisions based on whatever. And I'm pretty sure she does the same, and we've all heard it from other people. So the first thing I try to do is figure out who the decision makers are. Is it husband, wife? Do you own this individually? And a lot of times you can figure that out right from public record. If you're going to a listing appointment and you haven't done your due diligence, or you haven't pulled up the property in public record to see who the owners are, then again, that leads us to our next tab, but you haven't done your research. So when we talk about research and we're talking about negotiation, you're going to often be a better negotiator if you've done your research, if you've done your homework, if you know as much about the property, about the client, about the neighborhood, and everything else. So going to a listing appointment, again, we're tackling this from the seller side. I want to figure out as much about the house as I possibly can, and I'm going to do that through going through public record. I'm going to figure out, the layout, the bedroom count, the square footage. I'm also going to go to Google Maps. I'm going to walk the neighborhood. I'm going to make sure, what does this house look like from the outside? What am I up against? Can I tell from Google Map, imagery from 2016 that the house is failing then, and it probably looks even worse now. I'm going to figure out as much as I can about the seller. When did they buy the house? What does their mortgage say on, on that public record? I mean, if you really want to do your due diligence, and you probably should, take the seller's name and put it into Google. You might have to, if it's a generic name, if it's a John Smith, no offense, but you might have to throw Boston or Quincy or Dorchester or the location behind it, see if you can narrow in, or maybe throw the address into Google. You can find out a lot from throwing your address into Google to see if there's any criminal reports that pop up. Maybe this person has a motivation because the tenants that live in their building are causing all types of problems where cops are constantly being called to the property. There's a lot. Google is a powerful tool, and there's a lot that you can figure out through Google. Just putting an address in, someone's name, the seller's name, you can figure out. I've figured out, probate situations and everything else because I, put the name into Google and figured out that the grandfather had died and now the grandson owns, and all these different other things. If you're not familiar with the neighborhood, again, Google Maps, walking the neighborhood, walking the couple streets around. Always turn your map around on Google Maps. This is, real situations. Is it the ugliest house on the street? Is it the nicest house on the street? Are there project buildings right next door? Are they across the street? Is there, a notorious park for, across the street or in that neighborhood? So try to do as much research as you can. And then one of the things that I'm always thinking about before I even get to the property is who my likely buyer is. If I'm going to be listing this, one of the things that I think impress, a client, a potential seller all the time, and something that you should just be thinking about anyway, is who is the likely buyer for this property. You're more likely to get that listing and close that deal, and be more informed if you're able to inform your client, your seller client, who their likely buyer is. Is it investor? Is it an owner occupant? Is it, someone who is it a foreign buyer? Is it, someone with money that's coming from out of state? Is it a, whoever that client is, try to narrow it down and say, this is how I'm going to find them. This is who likely is going to buy your property. And you're better armed for negotiation with that as well. So get in front of them. We talked about it. See previous slide. That's the next step, is getting that face-to-face. I'm going to get their text. I'm going to try not to close deals over text or email. I like to build rapport. I like to get in front of people. Again, today most people are using text messages to communicate. I mean, I probably receive 100 plus a day. But if you're also trying to get a $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 listing, get in front of that person. I mean, I know some people probably think it's old school or whatever, and they try to want to just text and email through everything because they're introverts and they really don't like being in front of people. But you're in the sales business. You need to get in front of people. You need to, people don't have a relationship. They don't have loyalty to someone on the other end of a text message. You really want to get that face-to-face time, and then get them into your CRM. We know from being in sales, from the time that you meet that person, or you get that initial call, to the time that you actually get paid for this thing is a very long timeline. There's a lot of things that happen. those of you who've been, with us for a while, or been in the business for a while, the importance of a CRM, you've heard me say this already. Think about the next step is building rapport. So why is your CRM, right here, and why is it so important? I go to, meet to Lisa. Lisa's my listing client, and I go to meet Lisa, and she has a dog named Zoe, and Zoe is not feeling well today at the time of the appointment, and she declines to meet me. She says, let's meet next week, and then next week happens, and then she does not. I'm going to go back to my CRM, and I'm going to say, follow up with Lisa. She's, her dog Zoe, she's not feeling well today, blah, blah, blah. When I follow up with her, I'm not going to say, hey, Lisa, are you ready to meet right now? I'm going to build rapport right from the start. Hey, how is Zoe doing today? Is she feeling better? Lisa's going to immediately be, attached to me, or have a better building, or, have a better rapport with me, because I didn't go straight into, what I want, a listing agreement. I went into building rapport to her, something that she cares about, her dog. So I'm basically asking her about something that has nothing to do with sales related, and already she's like, wow, this guy actually remembered who my dog was, the dog's name, and immediately that is that feeling of comfort that I like this kid, and I'm probably not going to use somebody else, because if this person actually cares about me and is into this for more than just a paycheck at the end of the day. You won't be able to remember that unless you, again, I started off with a lot of sticky notes and stuff like that, but that's what your CRM is for, to take those notes, to build rapport. I want to know that Lisa's son is in, and has baseball games on Saturday, so I'm not going to call her at that point, but I might call her Saturday evening and say, hey, did Brian do well in his baseball game today? Is Zoe feeling better? I'm going to make her feel like she's my only client in the world. And you talk about negotiation. If you begin with things like these, negotiation becomes just a little bit easier. Basically, what I'm saying at the end of the day is, people think that negotiation is all about tactics and tricks, and say this and they'll crumble, and all of a sudden you have a signed listing agreement. Sometimes it's just about being human, and building rapport and building relationships with other people. So building rapport, finding a common ground, finding some things that you're related to. So say you didn't have, say for instance, this situation that we just talked about with Lisa didn't happen, but you got the listing appointment the same day, and you got there. If you're the type of person, I'm this type of person. I'm business. I have something to do. I'm constantly looking at my watch, thinking about the next thing that I have to do or whatever. That's not how you build rapport. I had to change the way that I do things, especially when I go and talk to people. They want to know that there's some type of relationship there besides money and commissions and everything else. So when you're sitting down, you get to that kitchen table, if every single one of your questions about the property or the listing or the timeline, what you're trying to get to ultimately, you're going to have a much, that other agent that comes in after you, or that came in before you, might just get the listing agreement. So I want to spend some time, as I'm telling these people that they need to depersonalize their home for the sale or for the open house. I'm also looking at some pictures, and I'm saying, oh, I also went to Northeastern. I didn't realize that. Did your wife go to Northeastern? Okay, yeah, I also went there as well. What year did she graduate, or what did she study? I wonder if some of the same professors are there. Just shooting the shit, just building rapport, just looking at, some of the trophies that they might have on the shelf. You're good at golf? Excellent. Yeah, I'm learning to play myself. Like I said, maybe after this we can go out and you can teach me how to, like I said, not hold the club like a baseball bat. Cheesy shit like that is what's going to get the deal done at the end of the day. Just building that rapport, finding that common ground, having a conversation. If I'm there, if I get in your house, we're going to talk for at least, unless you're kicking me out, at least 20 minutes of that time. Nothing related to the business, nothing related to sales, just about you, who you are, what common interests that we have. So when I follow up with you, so when you tell me some BS about your wife not being able to, like I said, being here today, and she was out with the kids and she needs to sign as well, and you want to think about it, next time I talk to you, we already have something that, that we can chat about. It's not me calling you like, hey, you guys ready to sign yet? It's me calling you saying, hey, did you see what Tiger did today? amazing, finally came back and, and won one. I know they have an interest in golf because I did that when I did my due diligence as, as I'm walking through their house. So spend some quality time, spend some time gathering info, and I'm going to get you to like me at the end of the day. I'm going to take a little bit of a sidetrack. Anybody have any questions from there? Again, if you just want, if like I said, throw anything that isn't clear, or if I'm, rushing through things or whatever, just like I said, throw something in the inbox, and when we get a chance, we'll, like I said, we'll stop and answer whatever you have. But time kills all deals. You guys have probably heard me say this as well. And by this I mean, for me, I'm always trying to, not in a salesy way, not in, hey, hurry up and sell, or you're never going to be able to sell this. But buyers, or a seller is always going to say, well, is now a good time to sell? Should I list my house now? And for me, I'm always going to create a sense of urgency. There's never going to be a situation where I'm going to say, no, now is not a good time, unless I'm dead, unless for some reason, like, when's a good time not to sell? I mean, if you are in, not to, hopefully, like I said, I mean, I know Lisa, South Carolina, but for instance, the hurricane, or, like I said, if you're in Puerto Rico or something like that, maybe the week after the hurricane, probably not a good time to sell. That I'm not going to tell you, no, you need to liquidate right now and you're going to get topped out. I'd be lying to your face if that was the case. But without lying, I'm always going to try to create a sense of urgency, right? So if I'm listing in, if I get a listing appointment in February, understanding the spring market buyers are coming out. The market is hot. Weather is good, and the spring market is great. Let's do it. Let's say I'm going into the winter. I'm just going to change my strategy. I'm just going to tell you the exact same thing. So supply and demand basically tells us, okay, if all the buyers are coming back during the spring market, and Boston's great during the spring market and things are hot, then I'm going to approach it differently. I'm going to say, well, maybe we should try to list in the cellar, in the winter, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, because there's less competition. There's still buyers out here. The market is still very hot. We're like I said, buyers are not going away because it's snow on the ground. If you're the only house on, on the market, at this time, like I said, we're the only gig in town. So I mean, somebody's going to have to come to us, instead of us basically doing what everyone else does and putting your house right on in April or May and being right in the thick of the competition. And now you're basically saying we're competing with your neighbor who's listing in the spring and everybody else who's throwing it up. Maybe we think about listing in the winter. Maybe we think about listing in December, when the competition is low. Something to think about. If the market's hot, like I said, especially, sellers right now, we currently in Boston are in a seller's market, understanding that, like I said, if you put something on the market, it's going to move. And like I said, if the market changes, we're in a buyer's market, making sure that you're educating your buyers about that as well. Buyer financing programs, educating your buyers about, so that's where I was going with time kills all deals. So buyer financing programs, FHA loans take a little bit longer, mass housing loans take a little bit longer. We want to, the best part of negotiation is, like I said, if we can get two people to agree, you want to be able to close that deal as quickly as possible before something else happens. The longer your buyer FHA loans and everything like that, take, and mass housing loans and everything, if you have somebody with a cash offer, you want to basically create a sense of urgency. Your sellers they need to be ready to go, and make things happen. So, and last but not least is, consistent follow-up. We're salespeople. That's what we do. Again, and I get caught in this as well, and Lisa knows, and she corrects me on it all the time, is, I don't want to bother people, right? I don't want to feel like I'm spamming people or, getting into their email, and, but we're also looking at $800,000 sales, $900,000 sales, $1 million, $1 million, right? So you're talking about $20,000 in commissions, $30,000 in commission, getting people's inbox. Like I said, it's not spam, it's follow up. It's creating, a sense of, that sense of urgency, understanding that if you take a listing appointment today, and they push you off for 2 weeks, and then they push you off for another month, and then they push you off for 3 weeks after that, there's a good chance every single day that goes by that you're never going to get that deal. Sometimes they come back, and sometimes they're being completely legit, but you want to follow up, create a sense of urgency, without being too salesy and without, creating any false, advertising or anything, saying anything that's completely false. Creating that sense of urgency, because time does kill all deals. So when I say follow up, I don't mean, it's not necessarily, hey, are you ready to list right now? It's, hey, like I said, just wanted to let you know, our company is, like I said, we have another listing. Chris Johnson in our office has another listing in Chelsea, and I see that you're listing something in Chelsea, and like I said, his house is maybe a little bit comparable to yours, or I just found out that there's a new train station, or they're renovating the train station in Chelsea, and I just wanted to see if you knew about it, or whatever it may be. That's follow up. It's not necessarily, hey, sign a listing agreement. Sometimes it's just touching base and having some sort of communication with that client at various intervals through until you get that listing sold, and then even after you get the listing agreement done. This is something I've always so now we're talking a little bit more about negotiation, right? And this is something I've always I felt, if you take a second to just read this really quickly, and I'll give you my interpretation of it. So what Barbara's trying to say here is, and I can't remember who I was speaking to the other day, but I just had a conversation with one of you about this the other day. I'm always going to make everything that I do in a negotiation, whether I'm working the seller side or the buyer side, seem more difficult than it is, right? And she's basically saying nothing poisons a deal faster than when asking price is immediately accepted. Basically, what that means is she's exactly right. It's, if I'm on the seller side, and the seller feels like they underpriced their home if things happen too quickly, right? The buyer feels like they overbid if you come back and say, yep, signed, here you go, right? So I'm always going to make things seem more difficult, right? So I've been in a situation where I've had a listing, and I've received an offer that was $30,000-$40,000 over asking price, and the next offer was $30,000-$40,000 below asking price. I'm not going to hurry up, sign, and get that right back to that buyer, because that buyer, even indirectly through their listing agent, is going to feel like, should I overbid? And what's going to happen is now, after home inspection, they're going to try to get significant discounts and everything else. So some of the things that you can do without, like I said, lying to anybody or anything like that is you create a sense of competition. So instead of you already know that client is getting their offers, signed and working with your client. But I'm going to go back to that buyer's agent, and I'm going to ask some follow-up questions, and I'm going to make it seem like they're right in the thick of things. But depending on whether they can do a couple of things for me, that might get their offer over the hurdle, right? So here's what you can probably do to make this buyer feel like they were right there and they just barely made it over. I might go back to the buyer and basically say, okay, so we have a couple offers. Completely true. That's completely true. We have offers A, B, C, and D. You're off by a mile. But could you possibly consider shortening the the home inspection period down to 7 days? I think that might be able to get it done, right? You already have them done, but you don't want to make them feel like they're so far ahead of the competition that they submitted something, and now they feel insecure, and now they're going to pick you apart during the home inspection and everything else. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to say something along those lines of, can we, we're almost there, but what I'd like to do is, there are a couple offers with really strong financing on the table. Your offer, like I said, I've never worked with this mortgage broker. Let me call your mortgage broker. Give me till tomorrow morning. Let me see what I can do. I'm going to talk to my seller. She's a little bit on the fence about it, whatever it may be. But I'm always going to create a sense of that competition there, on both sides. Working with my seller. If you're in that situation with the seller, I mean, that offer is clear unless there's, like I said, unless you don't think the financing is going to go through. But in that case, your seller should feel comfortable if they listed and they're getting above asking price. But hopefully that makes sense. I'm always going to try to create. I'll give you another scenario. Someone calls you up and you'll get this question a lot. If you're new to the business, then you probably don't know, like I said, are familiar with it. But somebody, like I said, a few of you have been on, you know that this is the way things work. Listing agent or buyer, you have a listing, buyer agent calls you up and says, do you have any other offers? Again, I'm not a person that advocates for lying. But I like to, like I said, elaborate on the truth a little bit. So I'm always, or, like I said, expand on the truth. So I'm always going to answer with something along the lines of nothing in writing yet. But, like I said, I've been told by a couple agents that things are coming over. And if you want to get in, I would, advise you to submit something today or get something over to me immediately. My seller, basically, we're not doing, not necessarily doing a best and final. We're basically going to take whatever offer, she feels is best. She just really wants to get this done. So if you go the other way, right, if you basically just answer the question as, no, we don't have any other offers. Well, what do you think that buyer, I mean, put yourself in their shoes. What do you think that buyer agent is saying? Well, shit, maybe we should submit a lowball offer. It's been on for a week. It's been on for 2. They don't have anything yet. Maybe me and my client can get a little bit more aggressive. No, I don't, like I said, if you're setting yourself up immediately for a bad negotiation, right? Or, is putting yourself in a bad position before the negotiation even starts. You call me up as a buyer's agent and say, well, what's going on with the property, blah, blah. I'm going to try to reveal as little information about, the details to you. And again, I'm not talking about the specifics of the property. I'm talking about negotiation on the other side and what other offers we have. But I'm always going to create a sense of urgency, that feeling like you have to get something done now, or you might miss out, without saying that directly. Yeah, no, I don't, like I said, don't have any offers on the table yet. I'm expecting one later on this afternoon. I'm always expecting an offer. If I'm listing something, that's not a lie, that's absolutely true. I'm always expecting something. So I'm expecting something later on this afternoon. I've been told by another agent that there's, they have a lot of interest. Nothing in writing as of yet, but I anticipate that a few offers will come through, a few strong offers will come through. If you want to get something done, I would suggest that your buyer get something done pretty quickly, so we can get this on the road. My client's ready to make a move, and plans on accepting the first good offer that comes to the door. So hopefully that makes sense. It goes back to what we just talked about, just creating that sense of urgency. Something you guys have also heard me say, prior, and it's one of the kind of the bedrocks of where I am and what I'm about, and one of the things that I'm always looking at when I'm going into negotiation. I'm always trying to. I just feel like you're a better negotiator. You're a better salesperson. So again, I'm looking at this from the seller side, right? I'm always trying to sit on the opposite side of the table. If I'm representing the seller, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, well, what does the buyer think about my listing? What is how would the buyer respond to this new information? I'm always trying to walk in the shoes of my competition and imagine how they would feel or what they would do if I said this, or if we listed at this price, or whatever it may be, as we're going through a negotiation. I think you want to advocate for your clients, buyer, seller, as much as possible. You want to be the best seller representative, the best buyer representative for them, but you also have to, it's not just about push. Sometimes you have to push back on your seller. Sometimes you have to push back on your buyer because they're wrong. They're just not in a great position. And the only way that you would know that is if you take a step back, you take your emotions out of this transaction, and decide and think about, hey, if I was representing that seller, if I was representing that buyer, what would I do? How would I feel? And just kind of always walking in their shoes. So I guess a good example would be, if I submit a lowball offer, well, like I said, we'll kind of, I'll let you guys, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, I don't want to just throw out random examples there, but if you have a scenario that you've been through already, that you'd like to discuss or that you can share with us or whatever like that, let us know through the question box, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit further. So the other side of negotiation, or one other thing that you want to talk about negotiation, people think it's, especially in real estate, all about price. It's, hey, if I get over asking price, then I've won. You know, if I'm from the seller, or if I beat my buyer up on, you know, beat the seller up on price, you know, then I've won as well. Negotiation is more than just, you know, price. It's timeline, it's fixtures, it's personal items, it's a vacancy. So making sure that you are using all of your tools when you're negotiating. Lisa and I are just working on a, you know, a deal where we're, you know, talking about something very similar, you know, to this right now. It's, you know, the seller, you know, wants, is a hard line on their price, right? They want 800,000. That's the price that they want, regardless. But it's weird to me, but you know, this is the way some people are. You know, people are not necessarily always, you know, in the business and have as much knowledge as you and I do. That, you know, like I said, they're willing to provide vacancies, you know, as long as they get that price, even though the vacancies might cost more than, you know, an actual price reduction. So understanding timeline could be, you know, a very, very important negotiating tool, right? So some of you may be familiar, I'm in the process of selling a home as well. And right now, timeline is probably one of the more important things to me. I want to get this deal done quickly. I have an FHA buyer on the table. And I know that's probably my best buyer, you know, considering my price point. But I also know that that's probably the longest timeline. I know that there's probably going to be some appraisal hitches there, and I know there's probably going to be some other, you know, financing, you know, issues there or whatever like that. So understanding timeline. If one of the things that, so we just talked about it, one of the things that you can negotiate is say, okay, well, if we're going to give you this price, we need the home inspection done in 4 days. Then, you know, it's Thursday today. We need it done by Sunday. You have a full weekend. We can't give you a full 10 days, or we don't want to give you a full 10 days to do the home inspection. If you can agree to a shorter timeline, then we'll agree to your lower price. All right. Or, hey, you know, we like the light fixture. Sellers, you know, or this is probably something for your seller, right? My grandmother, you know, would, you know, collect chandeliers and have, you know, this, you know, big attachment to like these grand chandeliers. So if I'm buying my house for my grandmother or someone similar to my grandma, I might be like, well, you know what? Why don't you give me the house for $5 grand less or $3 grand less or whatever like that? But you can take the big fancy chandelier in the foyer, or you could take, you know, the front door. And again, some people are like, what are you talking about? But yeah, some people attach the weirdest things in the world. So you can take, you know, a certain fixture out of the house, or you leave a certain fixture in the house, and the price is adjusted accordingly. Personal items. I've done deals where, you know, a BMW was included, and or actually an antique car as well. Couldn't tell you, I don't know if it was a Chevy or whatever it was. I just wrote antique car that was on a lot, you know, to stay with the property, you know, during that time of closing or whatever like that. It didn't have any title work with it or anything like that. So can you negotiate, you know, some personal property in or out of a deal to help you close something up? Some people might say, I don't really care about the car. It's been sitting there, it was my grandfather's. I have no idea where it came from or whatever like that. If you were interested, sure, you give me my price. I'll leave the car there. I didn't want to move it anyway. Great. Now we have a deal. So vacancies. I'm much more likely as an investor to buy a building that's vacant than one that's occupied. There are other investors that would not agree with me. They would say, I want to be making money from day one. I'm the type of investor that would say, I don't want your problems. I want to select my own tenants and you know, and get in there and know exactly who they are. So vacancies are a big deal. You know, I guess a good example around that is, you know, I'll probably pay you a little bit more for the property if you can deliver the property vacant for me. I'm much more likely to do that. So closing costs and prepaids, pretty much, if you like I said, if you're all familiar with that, the difference between closing costs and prepaids, it's kind of important for you to notice as a real estate agent. Closing costs are costs that are directly associated with the loan itself and, you know, the purchase of the property. So closing costs are your attorney fees, your mortgage origination fees, your recording fee, any type of thing, anything that's associated with the property that you are not going to see back at, you know, at some point in the future, or doesn't benefit you or the house. Prepaids are you're closing on the 13th of the month, you need to pay the taxes and insurance for the rest of that month. Those are prepaid expenses. When you buy a home, the insurance company wants you to pay a year of insurance up front, right from the start. So if your insurance is $4,000, those prepaids, that's going to bump up your closing costs by $4,000. Plus, you have to pay a few months of insurance to escrow, and escrow and taxes. So understanding those, and like I said, understanding that that's something you can negotiate in as well. Closing costs and prepaids can be, sometimes paid by the seller, to reduce, like I said, the out-of-pocket expenses for your buyer client. And understanding, if you're on the seller side, making sure that you fully disclose, because I've made this mistake as well. I was so excited about the offer, the full price offer, that I didn't read at the bottom of the offer that the seller was to credit buyer $10,000 towards closing costs and prepaids. And though it didn't kill the deal, the buyer or the seller was very upset with me when purchase and sales came around, and that language was put in there. I think I had to eat a couple $1,000s in commission because of that mistake. So making sure that you understand that you're well aware of that. If you're on the buyer side, you're helping your buyer reduce their out-of-pocket expenses. And if you are on the seller side, that is bringing down the net from that original offer, that was at the top of the offer sheet. And then contingencies. I'm much more likely to accept an offer with no contingencies than one where you want to do a pest inspection, a home inspection, a radon inspection, whatever other inspections there are. If you're basically checked off every single contingency box in every single inspection and you intend to do them all, don't get me wrong, it's in a buyer's right to do those things. And if you're on the buyer side, you should make sure you go down that list and talk about each one of those. Again, that's their right. But I'm much more likely to accept an offer as a seller with less of those contingencies in there. So you have to educate your buyers and you have to educate your sellers during the negotiation about which one of those things, what each one of those things mean. And then, like I said, your seller's or put it this way, let's say, give you an example, your buyer's a hard line 600,000, your buyer's a hard line 700,000, the seller wants, 715 or 720, you're $20,000 apart and you can't close that deal. Maybe you go back to and you reduce some of those contingencies. Maybe your seller is much more likely to accept, and you say, okay, well, they're no longer going to do lead paint because it doesn't really matter to them. They don't have any children under 6. They don't have any grandchildren under 6. Lead paint contingency they don't really need. Let's take that off the table. And maybe they do their home inspection in 2 days or in the next 48 hours. Would you accept the 720 now or the 700 now? Maybe your buyer comes down another 15, 20 grand. Maybe throw a personal item in there or whatever it may be. But the point is making sure that you understand that negotiation is not all about price. There are a lot of other tools within your belt that you can use to close deals, get them a little closer to completion. Highest offer isn't always the best. Absolutely. We had a house listed at 475, and we got an offer at 500. As a bidding war. Lisa, can you read that one for me and then summarize it? Let me stop. Let me go through one more slide and then we'll stop and see if we can talk a little bit more about that. The listen more than you speak. So a lot of smart people. Everyone on this call is a smart person. Like I said, we don't hire people unless they're smart people. But part of negotiation, part of understanding the other side, part of winning in negotiation is just listening more than you speak. At the end of the day, if I can learn more about what my opponent is, and I'm using the word opponent because you're not sparring with them, but they're like I said, they're on the opposite side of the negotiation. The more I can learn about their needs, and get them just talking, I'm asking them questions. People love to talk, and like I said, though I haven't stopped talking for the last 30 minutes, that's not what I mean. Like, people just love to talk about themselves and tell you their problems, and if you ask the right questions, and too many times, sales agents think that they need to go in there and they need to have all the answers to get the deal done. That's not true. You need to go in there and understand that you need to ask the right questions. You need to have all the best questions, or the right questions, and ask them in the right order and the right time. And if you do that and you're consistent about it, and you just keep asking questions, most deals are going to close themselves, because you're going to figure out so much information that like I said, most people are just going to close themselves. I mean, I literally, I've sat through listing appointments where somebody told me, yeah, like I said, my mother's dying and we need to sell this thing, and I'm gonna be honest with you, we want to ask for this price, but we'll probably take this price, and if that doesn't happen, we're going to drop it, and blah, blah. And I'm like, they've already thought about all this stuff before I even got there, and all I did was ask the right questions. Like, what happens if we don't get it sold in 30 days? Well, then we're going to drop the price, $100,000, and we're going to, like I said, oh, okay, well, shit, I thought I was going to have to kind of beat you up and kind of get the price down. But if you're already telling me that, we'll put that on paper. That's great. So if you get people talking about their desires, typical questions, right? Typical, well, why are you selling? Some agents don't even ask that question. That should be like number one. What is your motivation for selling? And the reason I want to know the motivation for your sale is because I want to keep you focused on that. If your motivation for selling is to move to Florida and retire, well, when we have a bad appraisal or a rough home inspection, what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to remind you, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, let's get through this. I know right now that things are rough, but the goal at the end of the day is to get you down to Florida as quickly as possible, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help you get to Florida. I'm constantly reminding them about the end game. I'm constantly reminding people. Get distracted. They get problems happen. I don't want to do this right now. This is frustrating. But you have to a good salesperson is going to remind their clients about where they're trying to go at the end of it. If the goal is to sell this investment property to fund your kid's college, I know we're having trouble right now, Mrs. Seller, and this is a tough negotiation, but I'm pretty sure your son Brian is going to love you once he gets to MIT. I wish I had, a mother that was willing to sell something like this for me, constantly reminding them about the end game. So I'm always going to want to know their motivation for selling. That's, question, number one, right off the rip. Timeline, how much time do you have to sell it? Are you in a rush? That's going to give you a really good indication of how motivated they are. If they're like, hey, I really need, school starts in September, and right now we're in June. Well, yeah, your timeline is pretty short. If you're going to fund this September, like I said, and tuition probably needs to be paid before that. So we need to get this house cleaned up as quickly as possible to get this cash to get your son in school. So their timeline, their motivation, any other factors that, go along with it. The point is, you want to ask as many questions as possible, find out as much as you can, do less speaking than listening, if that makes sense. So, Lisa?
Tiana was just giving an example of how the highest offer isn't always the best. She had a house listed for $475. They got an offer at $500 in a bidding war. They went through appraisal, came back at $460, and her seller walked away from that buyer because it was so low. The second best offer was asking price. They went back to them. The appraisal came back at $465. Ultimately, he lost a ton of time, but only gained $5,000 because all he saw was the number.
Yeah, no, and Tiana is absolutely right. I mean, that's part of, that's that tool belt. I mean, you have to educate your clients as best as possible that not everything is about price. I mean, that's what it comes. She's 100% correct, and there's a million examples just like that. I mean, it's hard to have a client turn away from $35,000 or $20,000 and not see the number clearly. But I mean, I guess a really clear example is I have a house listed at $700,000, and I get a $680 offer. It's all cash, no contingencies, close in 30 days. Or I get a $700 off full asking price. It's an FHA loan, and again, I'm beating up the FHA loan. I'm not against it. I mean, like I said, I have several FHA loans myself, but this is reality. This is what we're talking about. FHA loan, tough appraisal, home inspection, termite inspection, all these different other things. I'm going to try to push my client to see that that's 680. You probably should take that. It's cash. There's no contingencies. They're putting down 50 grand. If they don't close, we're going to walk away with their 50 grand, or you're going to walk away with their 50 grand. I mean, that's a very clear cut example, but those are the type of, situations that you have to measure when you're representing your client. So yes, Tiana is absolutely right. The highest priced offer is not always your best offer. So 10 times that you'll probably have to negotiate during a typical transaction. You're negotiating right from the start when you sign the listing agreement. Your listing agreement is going to be for what commission price. Your listing agreement is going to be for how long. Obviously, the longer that you have to sell, the longer that the more opportunity that you have. Shorting a listing agreement. So here's something to consider, and this is why I've put it on there. I've had clients hesitate to give me a listing opportunity. They didn't know who Willie Mandrell was. They didn't know who the Mandrell company was. I was operating in, let's call it Newton or something, where we're not as familiar, as we are to clients in somewhere like Dorchester, right? So it's not exactly our backyard. I can see his hesitation in wanting to give me the listing. We had worked something out or whatever it was, and I can't remember if this was Newton or Braintree, but it was a situation where I was thinking, again, we're in a negotiation. I'm negotiating with this seller to sign this listing agreement for something that I want to help him sell to earn a commission. So I'm constantly in negotiation mode, and I basically was able to say to this client, I was like, why don't you give me 3 weeks? If I can't get your home done in 3 weeks, most people are signing 6-month, 9-month, 12-month listing agreements. And I'm basically saying, I'm so confident that I can get this thing done for you. All you have to do is sign a 3-week listing agreement with me. And if I'm not under contract within 3 weeks, you fire me and you go hire somebody else. I actually didn't sell the property in 3 weeks. I sold in like 2 months or whatever like that. But he was so impressed with my determination to sell it that he extended the listing agreement, and it actually wasn't even a question when the listing agreement expired. Like I said, we were several open houses, several successful open houses. So you're constantly in that as well. Obviously, you would like to come in and say, give me 6 months, give me 9 months, give me 5%. But you're in negotiation with that client. And if, like I said, if you're a new agent, you're trying to earn their business, signing a contract with you for 6 months could be something you'd be like, hey, I've never sold a house before. I'm not familiar with this neighborhood. You might want to consider taking a shorter term just to get yourself in there, just to get proof that you can get this thing done. And then if you don't, then like I said, you at least you got a shot at it. And if you do, like I said, you were probably able to get that, versus you trying to compete with someone who's been in the business for 25 years, that 50-50 shot, that second agent, a lot more experience. Your hunger, desire to compete might get it done on a shorter listing agreement. Second time you're going to negotiate when you're asking for a price reduction. So you're going back to your seller. They listed at $700,000. It didn't sell. You're going to have to renegotiate. And a lot of times, if you're proactive, this is something you negotiate at the listing appointment itself, right? So just had this very same scenario as well. I told client that the property should be listed at $799. They came back and said, yeah, I don't like that number. I'm thinking more like $825. I came back and said, okay, I don't want to go back and forth with you on this. Clearly, I want to earn your business, but why don't we do this? I think, and I'm going to explain to them why $799 is a better number. Buyers don't search for properties. The way the buyers, I try to explain to the client, the way the MLS is set up, buyers search for properties 800 and below, 900 and below, 850 and below. So basically listing your property at 825, every single buyer that says, hey, I'm interested in this home or a home in this neighborhood for 800 and below, you're missing a big crowd of people by just $25,000. I try to explain to that client, even if you listed at $799, right now we're in a seller's market, and there's a good chance that people are going to pay you $825 if it's worth that anyway. She didn't listen. That's fine. So here's the second option is, if we're going to list at $825, then I would like an agreement with you that if we don't get this thing under contract, or we don't have the asking, or we don't get an offer that fits the bill, then in 2 weeks we bring it back down to the price that I would like. Instead of me hanging out at 825 where I know it's not going to sell, or I don't think that, you know, that we're going to get much attention, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to put it out there for 2 weeks. We're going to do a couple open houses and see what type of activity we get. If we don't get the activity that we need, then I would like to have an agreement with you right off the top that we're going to bring this thing back down to $799, right where it should be at the 2 week mark. She agreed to that, and we moved forward with the listing agreement. Next time you're gonna, you know, have to negotiate with somebody is, you know, while taking, you know, a buyer offer in. So again, we talked about, you know, do you have any offers? Of course, I have offers coming. I have offers on the table. Either way, hurry up and get your client's offer in, or, you know, like I said, creating that sense of urgency, or they're going to lose it. You know, you remember that everything that we're talking about, someone else is also being trained on, or, you know, being, you know, discussing in their office. So as much as we like you as a salesperson to probe and ask questions, and, you know, and you know, speak less than you listen, somebody else is also probing and asking you for questions on the listing side as well. So you have to understand which questions you want to answer, price, square footage, blah blah blah. But as that person starts to, and I've had you know, it's happened to me plenty of times. People are, you know, salespeople are salespeople. They're trying to build a rapport with you as well. That buyer agent is trying to build a rapport with you. Just like if you're representing a buyer, you should be doing the same exact thing. You're trying to find a common ground. People are emotional creatures. That's just who we are. We make decisions because we think she's cute, or because you know, he laughed at my joke, or stupid stuff. It should be based on numbers and logic, but it's not always that case. So you have to understand that that's the way things work as well. So there's a buyer on the other end, a buyer's agent that's trying to build rapport with you. You have to protect your client as much as possible. Deliver the information that you should be delivering, that you have to. You want to create that sense of urgency, but you also don't want to give up a little bit too much more than you have to. And you'll know when you did, you know, because they're going to be probing, and then they're going to keep asking you questions, and eventually you can just have to cut them off and say, send the offer, my client and I will look at it, and if it fits the bill, we'll get you back a signed offer. Until I get anything in writing right now, like I said, we're just talking right now. And I have some other things, some other appointments I need to go to. Send it over, and I look forward to working with you. Next time is after the home inspection. Clearly, I try to tell everyone, and you should be well aware of this. Whatever you accept at the offer signing, I'm most of your negotiation and most of this business hopefully is from your seller side. Again, if you just turn this around, you get the exact same advice from the buyer side, but we're talking about the seller side. I'm sitting here and I have, you know, several offers, you know, on the table with my seller, or just one offer on the table, and the seller is negotiating, and they're like, you know what? I don't think that, you know, 500,000 is a bad price. Let's go ahead and move with it. I'm going to make sure that my seller is fully aware that 500 after the home inspection may not be 500. Maybe we need to hold the line on this price at 510 or 515 prior to the home inspection, knowing that after the home inspection, there might be a water heater. We walked through during your initial thing, and the water heater is 5-6 years old, and it's on its way out pretty soon. You know, your basement's a little moist, and or whatever it may be. There's no home inspection. I mean, even new construction has issues, right? So there's always going to be something there to consider. So holding the line during the offer, understanding that you're probably going to have to renegotiate after home inspection. Or the other way to look at it is, and I think I just had this conversation with Chris the other day, is if you are going to take an offer that, you know, is kind of right where your client wants to be, then maybe considering, and again, there's really no way that you can make this happen, but putting the language into your accepted offer that, yeah, we're going to accept 600 or we're going to accept 700, but the home inspection is for informational purposes only. We're not going to reduce the price further after home inspection. You go through and you do due diligence now. You're buying the property as is, you know, where is. Your home inspection is for informational purposes only. Again, it's kind of BS, to be honest with you. I mean, somebody can still renegotiate after the home inspection if the roof is leaking. I mean, you know, like I said, you still want to, you know, keep the offer. You're going to renegotiate, but having that language in there just so the buyers, kind of, it's almost like when you submit an offer and you're like, we want an answer back by today at noon. Yeah, yeah, okay. I'll make sure I get right back to you. It's the same front, it's the same bluff. It's kind of like, but if I get back to you at 1, all of a sudden your client is not interested in the house. Yeah, okay. So same logic there, but it's kind of pushing back a little bit and saying, we're not going to drop the price any further after home inspection. So understanding, like, home inspection is one period, taking the offer is one thing, but after the home inspection is something completely different. During the purchase and sales, you would think after home inspection everything is done, but I've had some deals fall apart at purchase and sales. We just couldn't find terms for some reason. That this is more kind of on your investment side, but terms that just kind of met both clients' needs. One client was going out of the country and everything else, and it just got really weird. And that kind of brings me into the next thing with the contract extensions. Sometimes, Lisa and I just had this, situation as well. Buyer comes in, we accept the offer. Buyer's family member dies, and all of a sudden now they're MIA and not doing their home inspection for 5 or 6 days. We're looking at contract extensions and everything else. Sometimes, most likely that's going to be attorneys that are negotiating that, but sometimes you need to step in and negotiate a contract extension as well, a signing of purchase of sales, a closing extension, or whatever it is. Those are constant negotiations. Those are things that are not just given to you. You constantly have to, again, be looking at things from both sides. Coming back to contract extensions, I'm constantly in a battle, and I don't understand why people, logic escapes people. Again, we're emotional creatures and we do things emotionally and we don't realize it all the time, but you have to understand that that's just the way life works. So an example is, seller says to me not too long ago, and this is my personal property, I'm buying this thing. You want a 4-day, extension. No, I don't really like that. I think I'm just going to put the property back on the market. Logic says you put the property back on the market, you need to remarket the thing. Now the thing's tainted. You need a new buyer. I'm talking about 4 days here, guy. 4 days that you basically want to put the property back on the market and sell it now in 45 to 50 days. We just talked about the buyer timeline at the beginning of this thing. You're talking about you restart that timeline. You're looking at 30, 40, 45, 50 days out before you get a new buyer. And that's assuming you get a new buyer on the table the day we pull this thing apart. I said 4 days. So you're never done negotiating until you actually close the deal and until you get your commission check, right? So you're even contract extensions, you're still negotiating. I basically had to say, you know what, fine. My mortgage broker's already given us the clear to close on this thing. I'm pretty confident. In order for me to get that extension, I basically had to go hard on my deposit. And basically what I mean is my deposit was non-refundable if for some reason I didn't close after the 4-day extension. So constantly negotiating, and that's probably not something you want to do representing your buyers, and that's more of an investor situation. But being the office that we are, representing a lot of investors, you should be familiar with that as well. When the seller didn't finish all the repairs, again, we're looking for an extension. We've had several people in the office go through this situation just recently. You're supposed to close on November 1st, and the seller is still working on the house, or the roof is still leaking, or whatever it may be. You're going to have to renegotiate. It becomes a big issue when the buyer's rate lock is expiring soon. So who's paying for that new rate lock? Who's paying for the extension on the buyer's side because the mortgage broker locked it up for 30 days and now you need an extra 10 days to get repairs done? Or if the buyer closes without the repairs being done, you're probably going to negotiate what's called a buyer or a seller holdback, right? So the seller sells the house for $700,000 and they pay off their mortgage, they pay off the taxes and everything else, and what's left over is called their proceeds. Their proceeds may be $200,000, $300,000, whatever it is. What you want to, and again, you would think that most attorneys would figure this out for you, but the longer you operate as a real estate agent, you'll realize that you have to be not only the sales agent, but the mortgage broker a lot of times, and the attorney, and the closing attorney. You need to make sure everyone is doing their job or you won't get paid. So you need to know, that a seller holdback is something that can be done. So it's either one or two things. Either the seller is basically going to pay for the rate lock for the buyer, or the seller, it might be negotiated that the repairs are worth $10,000, and of those $200,000 that the seller was going to get back at closing, we're going to withhold $10,000 back until those repairs get done, right? So now the buyer is still able to close on the property. They're able to move into the property, and now the seller has to get their proceeds and come back and make those repairs after the thing is closed. And hopefully that makes sense to everybody. That's called a seller holdback. And the other concern during that time frame is the buyer rate lock. So rates are constantly moving. Your mortgage broker locks up a rate at 4.5 today, anticipating a close within 30 days of that rate lock. If it happens on day 32, the rates might be 5.25. They might be 5% or whatever it may be. Your buyer's mortgage payment is now going to change. So there might be an additional cost to lock that up even further, or extend the rate lock is what they call it. Next time you're going to negotiate is when the appraisal comes back short. This happened to me plenty of times. So we negotiated a price. Everybody agreed to $700,000. Bank comes in. We did the home inspection. We're under contract. Everything is great. Bank comes in, or bank appraiser comes in and says the house is only worth $680. What do you do now? You thought the deal was done. You were already counting your commission check. You were on your way to vacation, and now 10 days before you're supposed to get paid, you have another problem that you need to negotiate. So when the appraisal comes back short, there's only really two ways to solve this. And I've had successfully done both, and I've successfully failed at closing both as well. Well, three ways maybe, depending on how you want to look at it. So solution number one is the easiest. Seller reduces the price. You basically have to go back to your client. I'm the listing agent again, and I'm going back to the buyer's agent. I'm basically saying, you need to, the appraisal is what the appraisal is. I understand that here's the real. The appraisal is basically just someone's opinion of value. But that's not what I'm going to tell the buyer's agent. I'm going to basically make it seem like the appraisal is what the appraisal is. The appraisal is fact. The house is not worth $700,000. The house is worth $680. The appraiser said it. The bank said it. If you don't negotiate with us and you try to go on to the next buyer and they give you $700, what do you think is going to happen with the next appraisal? It's going to come back at $680 again. It's just what the house is worth. So you might as well do your best, to work with your client and work with us to close this thing down, right? So you need to go back to your seller and tell them, like I said, though we offered $700, we went under contract for $700. No one can buy this house for $700. Again, I'm hyperbole, like I said, because we don't know what the next appraisal will come back at. No one can buy this house at $700. You might as well work with us. Sometimes they come back and say we'll split the difference, or we're just going to reduce the price. Yeah, I agree with you. The other side of it, I've had a situation where I could not believe this happened, but my buyers wanted the property so badly that they basically just paid the difference in cash for the appraisal, the appraisal that came back short. I think it was like $25,000-$30,000 that they basically just, in addition to their down payment and all the other expenses that they were coming out of pocket with, they basically just said, I did my best to negotiate on their behalf to get the price reduced. I think, if I remember correctly, I think they came down $5,000 or $10,000, but the seller felt strongly that the bank was incorrect in their appraisal. This is the developer, someone who's pretty savvy, someone who understands that appraisals are just opinions of value, and that the opinion can change of somebody else. You have an appraiser come from the North Shore that doesn't know the South Shore, doesn't know, Quincy, Braintree, Milton, and they're, like I said, just going off of comps. They may not know what's going on in the market, that things are rapidly appreciating, a new train station, whatever it may be. Appraisal comes back short. Our developer felt like that was just not an accurate number. They held the line. My buyers basically said, yeah, we want the property anyway. This is where we want to raise our children. We're going to pay the difference. The only other thing that you can do, that was option one and number two, is basically consider reducing your commission to close up the gap. Obviously, as your broker, I am not advocating for anybody reducing their commission. I obviously want you to get paid. The company needs to make money as well. So we're always going to use that as your last tool, right? I mean, you're basically going to try to use your hammer. You're going to try to use a screwdriver, and then, that's the jackhammer that we need to break out, or the Sawzall, whatever it may be, if things don't go well. So I've done that on several occasions where basically okay, buyers come up a little bit, sellers come down a little bit, but both of them at a hard line right now. I'm not moving from 705. I'm not moving from 710. We're at a $5,000 difference. I know that my commission is $25,000. I might go back to the buyer's agent and say, hey, if you eat 2,500 and I eat 2,500, can we get this thing closed? Most likely that's going to happen because both parties understand if I have to go as a seller's agent, put this thing back out there, it's going to prolong the timetable for me to get paid. Buyers understand it's a seller's market right now. They're going to hopefully find another opportunity for their client, but maybe not. So, like I said, if you really wanted to, maybe you don't, split the difference depending on how you feel about it. I mean, again, this is one of those situations where I kind of leave it up to you. You can say maybe the buyer's agent pays all of the commission, and I know Tyon is probably like, yep, that's probably what I'm going to do. So, but yeah, so that's the last part of it is kind of like, how do you, like I said, can your commission close up the gap there? A couple different more scenarios, and I think this is our last slide, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. And if anybody has any questions, what time are we looking at? Little over an hour now, so I will wrap it up with this slide, and then, like I said, we want to hang out and talk. If there's any questions, any scenarios we want to discuss, I'm here until each one of you decides you want to go somewhere else. Strategy. A few more things to consider, right? So negotiation, I'm constantly negotiating. I'm constantly trying to strategize and think about things, right? So can't remember again who it was. Somebody called me up recently and said, I believe it was Chris, oh, should we look for a price drop? So I'm always kind of like, a seller basically says, yeah, let's drop the price 20 grand. I might not necessarily go and drop my price $20,000 on MLS, right? So the sellers, we haven't gotten any offers yet, or blah, blah, blah. I might not drop it 20 grand immediately on MLS. I know that the sellers basically give me a written email or verbal, confirmation that I can reduce the price on their house. But I might not. I might save 10 grand of that and use it at at my disposal another time. I understand that on MLS, when I do a price change or a price drop, that new information basically hits everyone's inbox, right? And now that goes back to the top of their MLS list, and now they're now seeing that property, right? So though the seller is giving me 20, I might only use 10 of it and save 10 of it for the following week or the following 2 weeks. Or maybe I only drop it $10,000, get a great offer, and like I said, basically able to save my client 10 grand, whatever it may be. So kind of a vague example, but like I said, trying to, like I said, use all your tools and use the things that you have at your disposal to the best of your abilities. I'm constantly reminding my clients, you can look at this however you want. This is the language that I use, but I'm working with a buyer, I'm working with a seller. Again, remember, you're talking about someone selling their largest asset that they've lived in for 30 years or that they've managed for 20 years, or someone buying a $700,000 home and they've never purchased a home before. This is where their kids are going to live. This is where they're going to school. There is so many, right? You and I as salespeople are thinking close, get to purchase and sales, and thinking about all the legal and financial aspects of this transaction. But again, the best negotiators, the best in the business are constantly putting themselves in someone else's shoes, putting yourself in your buyer's shoes. You're thinking, this is where their kids are going to go to school in this community. They're trying to figure out that. This is where they're going to a new supermarket now. They're trying to figure out parking for themselves. Can you park on the street at night? Can I afford this house? They're not just working with you, but they're working with their mortgage broker. They're working with the attorney. There's a lot going on in their life right now. You have to constantly remind them, that you'll have clients that come back, and if you're constantly just push, you might, I guess an example is the house is listed for $700,000. The seller's agent knows, and every other agent knows that house is worth $750 all day long. If you're basically just telling your client, hey, $750, we need to go there. That's great. You're trying to get them to win the offer, but if you're not educating them, if you're not putting yourself in their shoes, and letting them know that I work for you. Like I said, I'm trying to do everything that I can. You're telling me this is the house that you want. I want to educate, like I said, I want to let you know that this is a competitive market, and I want to give you as much education as possible. But at the end of the day, I work for you. If you want to go in at 710, I don't think that it's going to get done. I don't feel like it's going to get done, but it's 20 minutes worth of paperwork for me. We'll submit it. I think it's going to be at 750. A lot of times that I find that if I let one go right then and there and don't push and just kind of let them kind of do it, on the next offer, they're going to listen to me. They're not going to be like, I don't want to lose another one. What do you think I need to go at this one? And now I'm not that rigid, structure is not there. They're basically just going to say, well, what do you think I need to go at? I'm like, yeah, you think you need to go in $30,000 over asking price. And like I said, if you don't get that first one, a lot of times you can get the second one, but it's reminding your clients on the seller side and on the buyer side, I work for you. At the end of the day, you've hired me to do this, and I'm going to try to do the best job that I can. Take a step back and remove emotions. This can be an emotional business for not only the buyer seller, but also for real estate agents. We just had 3 offers or 3 deals fall through on one property. Never had that happen to me before. But you have to take a step back, and everything that you're doing, your job is to be the logic and in this transaction, basically removing the emotion and basically taking a step back and looking at everything from a numbers base, from a timing base, and being the control substance in this in this transaction when your client's all over the place. We already talked about this. I'm always expecting several offers. Hurry up. There's never a situation where I'm not expecting offers so you think about that. If you look at that on the buyer's end as well, there's a saying that everything that you hear during negotiation is BS. So I try not to take too much to heart, when people tell me, oh, this is happening and this is happening, because I know that's the same things that I'm saying on the other side. So you basically just have to, again, remove the emotion from it, take a step back. Is it likely that they're receiving offers? How much time do I have? Again, on the seller side, you have a lot more control because they could be telling the truth, but you have to make that determination. Best and final offers are due on. If I'm, again, some of you, they've been in the business for a little while, very familiar with this, but if I'm in a situation where I'm listing a property, I have 3 offers on the table, I'm not necessarily going to choose offer A, B, or C. I'm going to push back on every single one of those offers A, B, and C and say, you guys all submitted on Tuesday. This is great. I'm glad to hear from you. But right now, we're basically going into a best and final and offers due on Thursday. Today's Tuesday. I'm going to give everybody 48 hours or 24 hours. So maybe it's 24 hours because again, time is everything. I'm going to, I want you all to resubmit your offers with your best and final due on Wednesday at noon, and then I'm going to discuss it with my client on, a little after that, and maybe at 1 o'clock. I'm going to remind each one of those listing agents, because some of them could be new, some of them could be inexperienced, that your best and final offers are not just about price. They're about terms as well. My client wants the best and final, not just number, but your best terms as well. If you can shorten up your home inspection period, if you can put more money down, if you can get the conventional financing versus the FHA, go and do it. I'm going to give you 24 hours to get that done, but I want to get your best and final, not only price, but terms. Put that on my table, and it puts a lot of pressure on the buyer agent to go out and show all their cards in fear of losing, the actual deal. Cash versus financing, obviously any cash deals are better. When people are talking cash, they're talking less contingencies, no banks involved, no appraisals involved. They're talking about something that's just a lot more liquid than financing. So that's always a consideration, something you need to educate your buyers on if they have cash, something you need to educate your sellers on. Like I said, and we just talked about if there's a potential lower offer there. At the end of the day, it comes down to, I've been asked the question, 100 times, well, what do you think? I'm like, I mean, that's a hard question to answer. I don't feel comfortable spending your money, here. Right now, we're in a best and final. How badly do you want this property? I mean, I guess the question to you, Mrs. Buyer, would be, if we lose this deal, are you devastated? Are you discouraged? Or are you like, hey, let's go, there's another open house next weekend? So if that's the case, then let's go in at a number that we think that is competitive and let's not overpay for it. If you're like, school is right around the corner, this is where my kids go to school, the bus station, the train station, I have parking here, the house. If you're basically going to be just, let's go all in and let's get it done. How badly do you want this property at the end of the day? I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is the price and this is what I would do, because that's just irresponsible for me as a seller. This is something that you have to feel comfortable with. I don't want you to have any buyer's remorse at the end of the day. So it all comes down to how badly do you want this, and if you really want it badly, let's show them all our cards. Supply and demand, we talked about it. Creative frenzy. When I do an open house, when I market something, and Lisa may agree or disagree on this. I mean, sometimes, you know, a 3-hour open house is necessary. Sometimes I only want to do an hour open house, and the reason is I want to create an absolute frenzy. I want to create a situation where supply is in real estate is a funny thing, because there are no two homes that are exactly alike. If you like 701 Main Street, they're in Brockton or Quincy or whatever it is, there's no second 701 Main Street in Quincy. That's just the one property. So supply and demand, supply is limited, right? I want to create a sense of crazy demand. When you think about this, if you've represented a client, you walk into an open house and there's 25 people there and there's cars parked up and down the street and you can't get in, right? You could barely get into the open house. What are you going to tell your buyer? Look at the competition. Look at the demand that there is for this property. We need to go crazy. We need to go all in. Reverse that thinking, right? You show up to the open house and the guy's run into the door and he looks like he's been playing on the listing agent's been playing on his phone the entire time, and there's no cars in the driveway. You can hear the birds chirping and everything else. Maybe you fall in love with the place, but I mean, do you really see that the competition is where you need to submit an offer tonight and it needs to be $30,000 over asking price? So again, I don't know that either strategy is wrong. I understand where some people may say create, more opportunities for people to come. I'd rather do an hour maybe on 2 separate days versus a 2-hour open house, or maybe it's a 2-hour, depending on, again, none of these are not rules. I'm not saying an hour open house is better than 2. You have to look at it. If I have, a 3,500 square foot home that I'm listing, no, you're not going to do an hour open house on a Saturday. That just doesn't make sense. It's going to take 45 minutes for me to walk through that entire property and actually see it as a buyer. That just wouldn't make it. That means everyone would have to be there exactly at the right time. If you have a 600 square foot apartment in South Boston, I might just do an hour open house on a Saturday and then maybe do another hour open house on a Sunday. It's literally going to take me 3 minutes to walk through and determine whether I want to live there or not. So if it's only going to take me 3 minutes, I need people on top of people, so I want to shorten up my time frame. Supply and demand, creative frenzy, and then the different. Like I said, we just talked about the commissions, and should you split the difference? I think that's what I was referencing there. I apologize. I was up a little late with this one. There's actually a book out that says you should never split the difference. I apologize. That's where I was going. So you have a $20,000 price difference between 700 and 720. Your buyer is stuck at 700, and your listing client wants 720. The typical person basically going to say, or trying to get the deal done. Most people are going to say, well, why don't you guys just meet at the middle and split the difference at 710? While that may be true, or it may be the perfect scenario, and my seller client agrees to that, I'm not always going to give up 10 grand right off the start, right off the jump. Because here's the problem: if you're too anxious to get the deal done and you don't want to play the game, I basically say, hey, Mrs. Seller, we're at 720, the buyer is at 710, 700. Can we meet in the middle at 710? She goes, absolutely, let's get the deal done at 710. I'm going to go back to the buyer's agent and I'm going to say, yeah, my client's at 715. And why am I going to do that? Because if the buyer comes back and I drop all the way down to 710 immediately, and then the buyer comes back and says, yeah, my client is only at 705, well, my seller client is pissed now. We didn't split the difference, like I said. So I want to continue to play the game and try to get to that middle, but at the end of the day, I still have to kind of play the game. I'm going to drop 5, hopefully they come up 5. I'm going to drop another 5, and hopefully they come up 5, and we kind of meet in the middle. But if you drop too quickly, or if you go up too quickly, if you're representing the other side, though you might be in the mindset of let's split the difference, but you don't know that that's necessarily what the other party is thinking. So here's the other way I may approach it. I might just say, I can't make it. This is me as the listing agent talking to the buyer's agent. I can't make you any promises. I don't know what my client's thinking, but if I can get to 710, if I can get both parties, or if I can get her to 710, will your client come up? And now I'm not basically putting it on the table. I'm basically posing it as a hypothetical and saying, I don't know what they're going to do, but let's say, like I said, if I have this opportunity, or like I said, if I can get them down, would your client come up and we can meet there, and put the pressure back on them to go back to their client and get them up first, knowing that I have my client already down, or I've already discussed it with her. So hopefully all that makes sense. The very last slide, and basically this is kind of one of those situations where you just forget negotiation, you walk away from the table and just enjoy your weekend, because there's no deal here to be made.